The $0 Amish way to rot out any tree stump forever. No grinder, no poison. They never taught you this. It is the first cold morning of late October, and you walk out to the back corner of the property with your coffee going cold in your hand. The old maple came down in the spring storm, and you cut it up and split it and stacked it in the woodshed months ago. But the stump is still sitting there. 20 inches across, gray and weathered on top, the roots running out under the grass in every direction like the spokes of a wagon wheel. You have walked past it since April. Every time you mow, you have to lift the deck and swing wide around it. Every time you cross that part of the yard, your eye lands on it, like a splinter you cannot quite pull. And every time you have thought about being rid of it, the same number comes back to you. A man came out with a machine and looked at it for 2 minutes and told you $375, plus tax, plus a trip charge, 1 stump, 2 hours of his time. And you stood there in your own back corner and felt something that a great many good people in this country feel and never say out loud. That somewhere along the way you were quietly taught that the only way to deal with a dead tree stump is to write a check to a stranger with a $4,000 machine. Now, I want you to sit with this. Folks have been getting stumps out of the ground for as long as folks have owned ground. The families that first cleared this country did not have a grinder. And they did not have a bottle of chemical stump remover from the hardware store either. They had time, and they had a plain understanding of how a dead tree wants to fall apart all on its own. And here is the part almost nobody will tell you. That understanding is cheaper, safer, and kinder to your soil than anything a service will sell you. There is a way to make that stump in your back corner turn soft and dark and crumbly so that you can pull it out by the handful like wet cake, and it costs you almost nothing but a little patience and a few things you likely already have in the barn. And there is another old way, an honest fire that turns it to ash over a long evening. I am going to show you both, plain and slow, the way I would show my own son. My name is Amish Glick. I am Amish, and I farm here in Geauga County, Ohio. My family keeps a little over 100 acres, and I have personally cleared stumps out of fence lines, out of new garden ground, out of pasture corners, and out of the edge of the woodlot, and I have never once owned a grinder or paid a service to do it. I am going to be honest with you the whole way through, the way I always am, and that means I will tell you where these methods shine, and I will tell you plain where they fall short, because a man who only tells you the good half is a man selling you something. Now, the old ways my family uses go far past 1 stump, and there is more of it than fits in any one video. My wife Rachel and I gathered the whole of it into a book over at amishglick.com. That is the long version, and if you want it, it is there. I will not bring it up again. So let us get to work. Before I show you what to do, I want to tell you why it works. Because once you see the plain sense of it, everything after makes plain sense. A living tree is a stubborn thing to remove because it is full of water and sugar and it is fighting to live. But the stump in your yard is already dead, and a dead tree out in the weather is not a rock, it is food. There is a whole quiet kingdom of living things whose entire purpose in this world is to eat dead wood and turn it back into soil. The scientists call them saprophytic fungi and wood-rotting organisms. My grandfather just called it the wood-going punky. You have seen it 100 times. An old log at the edge of the woods that you kick and it caves in soft. Nobody ground that log down. Nobody poisoned it. The fungus ate it, thread by thread, and gave it back to the ground. So the whole trick of rotting a stump out is not to do the work yourself. The trick is to invite the little workers in and then feed them and keep them comfortable, so they do in a year or two what would take you a week of digging and a sore back. And here is the thing the fungus needs most, the thing hardly anybody explains. It needs 3 things to work fast. It needs water, because a dry stump is like a dry sponge. Nothing lives in it. It needs air, a little, because the good rot organisms breathe. And most of all, it needs nitrogen. Wood is nearly all carbon and almost no nitrogen. And the fungus cannot build its own body out of carbon alone, any more than you could live on nothing but sugar. When you give that stump a source of nitrogen, you are not poisoning it. You are handing the little workers the one thing they were short of, and they multiply and they eat faster. That is the whole secret, and there is no chemical company in the world that wants it to be that simple. Now let me tell you the parts list for the rotting method, and the whole of it comes to just about nothing. You want a drill, and the biggest bit you own, an inch across, is ideal, or as near to it as you have. You want a source of nitrogen. And here you have plain choices. A bag of Epsom salt runs you about $5 or $6 at the feed store, and I favor it because the magnesium and the sulfur it leaves behind are food for your garden, not poison. Unlike the rock salt some folks use, which will salt your ground dead for years. Or, cheaper still and free on most farms, a bucket of well-aged manure, or a scoop of blood meal from the garden shop. Or, honestly, and I will say it plain because it is true and it is free, the folks who cleared this land used to send the boys out to relieve themselves on the stump because there is good nitrogen in that too. Then you want a tarp or a sheet of heavy black plastic and a few stones to weigh it down. That is the whole of it. Call it $10 if you buy the salt, and nothing at all if you use what is already on the place. Let me put that nitrogen matter in a picture you can hold, because it is the heart of the whole thing, and I do not want you to miss it. The scientists have a name for it, the carbon to nitrogen ratio, and dry wood runs somewhere around 400 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen, which is a starving ration for anything trying to live in there. Good rich rot wants closer to 30 to 1. So when you add manure or blood meal or salt to the wood, you are not attacking the stump like a poison would. You are setting a full table. Think of it the way you would think of a compost pile. A pile of nothing but dry brown leaves sits there for years and does nothing but throw in a few shovels of green manure, and it heats up in your hand and turns to black gold by spring. A stump is just a compost pile that forgot to fall over, and all we are doing is feeding it what a compost pile gets fed. The engineers and the soil men would use the long words, but any farmer who ever built a manure pile already knows the whole of it in his bones. Now I will tell it slow, because the order matters. First, take a saw and cut the stump down as low to the ground as you safely can. Watch your blade, because dirt and grit down at the base will dull a saw faster than anything, and many a careful man keeps one old saw just for stump work that he does not mind ruining. The lower you cut, the less wood you have to rot, and the sooner you are done. Second, take your drill and that big bit and bore holes straight down into the top of the stump, 8 to 10 inches deep, and set them about 3 or 4 inches apart all across the face of it. Then bore a second ring of holes around the sides, angled down toward the center, so that you make a kind of sponge of the whole thing, full of channels for water and life to travel. Here is the part most folks get wrong. They drill 3 shy little holes and quit. You want that stump looking like a honeycomb. Every hole is a doorway. Third, pack each hole full of your Epsom salt or your nitrogen source and pack it firm. Do not just sprinkle it. Fourth, pour warm water slowly into every hole until it will hold no more. Warm water carries the salt down into the wood far better than cold, and it wakes the whole thing up. And now the 5th step, and this is the one that separates a stump that is soft in a year from one that just sits there gray for 5. Cover it. Lay your black tarp right over the top and weigh the edges down with stones, or better, tuck the edges into a shallow trench you scratch around the base. That tarp does 3 jobs at once. It holds the moisture in so the wood stays damp, which the fungus must have. It holds the warmth in, and warm rot is fast rot, same as a compost pile heats up. And it keeps the rain from washing all your nitrogen back out into the yard. Under that dark, warm, damp cover, the little workers go to town. Every 3 or 4 weeks, lift a corner, and if it has gone dry, Add water and a little more of your nitrogen and lay it back down. That is all the tending it wants. Now, I promised you honesty. So here is the honest scope of the rotting method before I go a step further. This is not a magic powder that dissolves a stump overnight, no matter what a bright bottle at the store might promise you. With the salt and the tarp and the nitrogen, a medium stump will go dead and punky in the top few inches within 2 or 3 months, and it will be soft enough clear through to break apart with a spade and a pick within 6 to 12 months, and gone entirely into the soil within a year or two. A big old oak with a deep taproot may take longer, and that is honest. If you need that stump gone by Saturday for a patio, this is not your method, and I will not pretend otherwise. But if you can let the ground and the little workers do the labor while you tend to other things, there is no cheaper, cleaner way in all the world. I will give you one more honest word on the rotting method, a caution most folks never think of until it bites them. And it is this: a rotting stump is soft, damp, sweet wood, and that is exactly what a colony of carpenter ants or termites goes looking for to set up house. Out at the fence line or the woodlot edge, that is no matter at all, the bugs are welcome and they only speed your rot along. But if your stump sits within 30 feet of your house or your barn or your woodshed, mind it, because you do not want to raise a nest of wood eaters right next to good timber they might move into. If the stump is close to a building, I would favor the fire method if you lawfully can, or dig and haul the rotted chunks well away as they soften, rather than letting a great damp nest sit there season after season near your sills. That is not in any Bright Bottle's instructions, but it is the sort of thing a careful neighbor tells you over the fence. And let me tell you about that neighbor, because I had an Englisher fellow down the road who did not believe a word of this. He had 2 stumps and a quote from a service for near $700 for the pair. I told him to save his money, drill them, salt them, and cover them, and he looked at me like I was daft. He did it anyway, mostly to prove me wrong, I think. He called me the next spring, and he said the smaller one had already gone so soft he pulled the middle of it out with a garden fork like scooping wet bread, and the big one was on its way. He said, and I will not soon forget it, he asked me why in the world nobody had ever told him a thing like this. And I told him the truth, which is that nobody with a machine to pay off has any reason to. Now, before I show you the fire method and the couple of tricks that speed the whole thing up, let me pause for just a moment. Every home has more of these quiet leaks than a body can count. Firewood and heat, water, the garden, the pantry, keeping food without a freezer, the little repairs. Rachel and I keep a community where we are inside answering questions ourselves, and folks share what is truly working in their own homes and on their own ground. The link is down in the description if you would like to sit at that table with us. Now, back to the stump. I said I would give you a couple of tricks that go beyond the plain salt and tarp, and here they are, because I want you to do better than just what most folks know. The first one is the finest thing I know for a stump, and hardly anybody outside the old farms thinks to do it. You can plant the rot. Instead of just waiting for whatever fungus wanders by, you can buy a little bag of mushroom spawn, wine cap or oyster mushroom spawn, for a few dollars from a garden supply, and pack it down into those drilled holes along with a handful of damp sawdust from the very tree you cut. Those are aggressive wood-eating mushrooms, and once they take hold, they will run right through that stump and turn it to soft, dark humus, far faster than nature would on her own. And here's the part that makes my grandfather smile down at me. Those same mushrooms, wine cap and oyster, are good eating. So you can rot your stump out and set your family a mess of mushrooms on the supper table off the very same wood, all in one turning of the season. There is no service on earth that will offer you a stump removal that feeds you. That is the old way outdoing the new one twice over. The second trick is about the season, and it costs nothing at all but knowing when to act. If the tree is still standing or freshly cut, The wisest time to start working against it is late summer, because by then the tree has pumped a whole year's worth of sugar down into its roots to store for winter. And a stump full of stored sugar is a richer feast for the fungus than a lean one. And if you drill and pack your stump going into the fall, you get the winter working for you for free. Water settles down into all those holes you drilled, and when the hard freezes come, that water turns to ice and swells, and it cracks the wood apart from the inside, splitting open new paths for the rot to follow come spring. The cold that most folks think of as a delay is actually a free helper, prying the stump apart while you sit by the stove. Nobody sells you that because nobody can charge you for the frost. And there is a third trick, the oldest one of all, for the man who is looking at a tree that is still standing and knows it must come down someday. It is called girdling, and my grandfather called it ringing the tree. A full year before you ever mean to fell it, you take a hatchet or a saw and you cut a clean band clear around the trunk, a couple of inches wide, deep enough to go through the bark and that thin living layer just beneath it all the way around so the ring meets itself. That living layer is the only road the tree has to carry food down to its roots, and once you cut the road, the roots slowly starve over the coming season, even while the top still looks green a while. By the time you fell that tree a year on, the roots are already dead and half spent, and the stump they leave behind is dry and lean and eager to rot instead of stubborn and full of life. You have done a year of the fungus's work for it before you ever picked up the drill, and you did it with 10 minutes and a hatchet. That is the kind of patient forethought the old folks live by, and it is a thing a grinding service would never dream of telling you, because a dead easy stump is a poor customer. Now let me give you the other honest old way, which is fire, because it has its place and it is the oldest land-clearing method in this whole country's history. Burning a dry stump out of the ground takes far less of your back than digging, but it takes hours of careful watching, and it is the method I must give you the most warning about. So hear me plain. The stump must be dead and dry, cured at least a year since the tree came down. Green wood will only smoke and sulk, and never truly burn. The method is this. Dig a small pit down under one side of the stump so that your fire sits below the wood, because heat rises and a fire set on top of a stump only scorches it, while a fire set beneath it climbs up into the heartwood and hollows it out. You can also bore those same big holes down into the top and fill them with a little dry kindling to give the fire a chimney to climb. Build a small fire of dry sticks in your pit, and as it catches, feed it larger and larger pieces, and keep feeding it as it works its way up and into the stump. A full stump burn will run you 8 to 12 hours of steady tending, and it will eat most of the tree's own wood as fuel before it is done, leaving you a hole of soft ash you can rake out and fill with soil. And here is the safety word plainly, because this matters more than anything else I will say today, and because I would sooner you skip this method entirely than get it wrong. First, the law. Most every county in this country regulates open burning, and a great many require a permit, and a great many more ban all open fire from late spring clear through fall when the woods are dry. Before you light a single match, you call your county fire marshal, and you ask. Fines for an illegal burn run from a few $100s to several thousand, and that is the small trouble. The large trouble is a fire that gets away from you into dry brush and does harm to your neighbor's property or your neighbor's person, and that is a weight no man wants to carry. Second, and this is the one hardly anyone warns you about, so mind it well. A stump fire does not stay where you can see it. The fire creeps down into the roots underground, and it will smolder along a root, out of sight, under the grass, for days after you believe you have put it out. Folks have soaked the top with a hose, gone to bed satisfied, and woke to find the fire had traveled 40 feet along a root and come up in the mulch against the house. So you never leave a stump fire, not for a minute while it burns. And when you are done, you flood the whole ground around it, not just the ashes, and you come back and check it warm with your bare hand the next day and the day after. Keep a hose and buckets and a shovel right there the whole time. Never burn on a windy day, never burn in dry conditions. For a man with room and a permit and a wet spring day, fire is a real and honest tool. For a family in a town or a suburb or a dry country, fire is not your method, and there is no shame at all in taking the tarp and the patience instead. Now I want to take a moment, because here is where it all comes together, and where I get a little worked up, and I will not apologize for it. Think on what we have walked through. You bore some holes, you pack in a few dollars of Epsom salt or a scoop of free manure, you lay a tarp, and the smallest living things in your soil eat that stump for you while you sleep. Or you plant a mushroom and let it do the same and feed you besides. Or, carefully and lawfully, you let an honest fire take it. Not one of those costs more than $10, and most cost nothing at all beyond your own patience. And every single one of them was used by careful farm folk across this whole country for 200 years before a stump grinding service ever backed a trailer into a driveway. So let me do the honest math for you plain, because the number is the whole point. A grinding service runs $300 to $500 a stump, and if you have a few stumps to clear, say 10 of them across a wooded lot over the years, that is $3,000 to $5,000 written out to a stranger. And the chemical stump removers on the store shelf, the ones in the bright jugs, are mostly just potassium nitrate, which is to say, nitrogen, the very same thing that is in your bag of feed store fertilizer, for a fraction of the price, sold to you at a markup with a picture of a stump on the label, so you think it is something special. It is not. To rot out that same set of 10 stumps my way cost you a bag of Epsom salt, a tarp you likely already own, a drill you already own, and your patience across a few seasons. Call it $30 to $150 for the lot, and I will name the two things the check to the service never buys you. It never buys back the good dark soil that a rotting stump leaves behind, which is often the richest patch in the whole yard when it is finished. And it never buys you the knowing, the being able to do it yourself the next time, and the time after that, for the rest of your days on your own ground. Now, I am not going to stand in my own yard and tell you there is a room full of men somewhere plotting to keep this from you. It is not that. It is worse than that, in a way, and stranger. Nobody had to sit down at a table and arrange it. There is a great deal of money in a machine that must be driven back and forth across the county and charged for by the stump, and there is a great deal of money in a bright jug of nitrate with a fine label. And there is no money at all, none whatsoever, in a man telling you to drill a few holes and wait for God's own fungus to do the work for free. So the simple old methods just sit quiet on the homesteads of the folks who never forgot them, while most everybody else writes a check every spring for what a tarp in a season would handle for almost nothing. It is not a conspiracy. It is just who has a reason to teach you a thing and who has every reason not to. And you, my friend, you can be the one who remembers. So here is what I want you to do this week. Walk out to that stump, the same one you have been mowing around all summer, and look at it honestly. Put your boot on it. Is it dead and dry, or is it still green and stubborn? How big across is it? And does it sit where you must be rid of it soon, or can it take its time? If you can wait, and most stumps can, get your drill and bore it full of holes this very weekend before the ground freezes, and pack them with salt or manure and lay a tarp, and let the coming winter's frost and the spring's fungus start the work while you do nothing at all. If you want to do it one better, order a little bag of wine cap or oyster spawn, and plant your rot and grow your supper. And if you are set on fire and you have the room and the wet weather and the law on your side, call your fire marshal first and never turn your back on it. But whatever you do not write the $400 check. The men who cleared this whole country did not have $400 to spare, and they got every stump out just the same. Tell me in the comments below what kind of tree your stump came from, and how long it has been sitting there, and which of these ways you mean to try. And if your own grandfather or your old uncle had a stump method we did not cover here, share the family story, because I will tell you now what we will not recommend. We do not recommend the dynamite. We do not recommend chaining it to the truck. And the old buried tire and gasoline trick, we most certainly do not recommend, so do not write me that one as advice. But the honest old ways, the little inherited methods, those are exactly the kind of knowing that gets lost forever when nobody writes it down, and the comments under this video are one of the ways we save them. I read every single one. Next time, since we have been speaking of patient work on the land, I am going to walk you through the old way our family keeps a hand tool sharp for a lifetime, the axe and the knife and the scythe, the stone and the file, and the small daily habits that mean you buy a good blade once and hand it down to your grandchildren still keen. It is the natural next step after today. Until then, match the stump to the method and do not write the check. Remember that the cheapest way in the world to be rid of a stump is the one your great-grandfather already knew by heart. That is how the careful old folks did it. And that is how it is still done on any homestead that remembers. The Lord bless you and keep you, and I will see you next time, if we are spared and willing.